All right. Thank you all for coming. I'm glad that, the weather isn't keeping you from swimming or, comfortably playing tennis or hanging out by your pool or whatever.
Sorry. Oh, gotcha. So the purpose of this meeting was to bring the tennis section up to speed on kind of where we've come, but mostly where we are now and where we're going forward. And so the agenda for today is really, I'm going to kind of do a quick kind of high level summary of, a little bit of where we've come in the last year plus, and talk about the process that we've set in place and how that's going to move forward. And then within that, I'll have some of the subcommittee chairs talk about, their parts and their involvement. And then basically we're going to open it up to a Q&A, right? So this is really for us to hear after we presented this president's letter not that long ago, for that, other communications, the town hall, processing that. I just want to answer your questions and kind of find out where, the tennis section stands and what your thoughts are. And we're going to take that back and kind of adjust that, after that. But we've done a lot of work. This group for 14 months has been really busy, and hopefully that'll be evident here. I don't want to reiterate too many of the things that we've talked about at the town meeting in the letter. So, but if you have questions and forget those things, we can get that at the questions. So we'll hold questions. There'll be a Q&A at the end. So we'll go through all this and we'll stay here as long as you have questions. So, okay. So just to kind of reiterate and remind, back in April 2022, that's when we were notified of the pending recent termination on use of the courts by the Frederick Gun School. So at that time, we created what we're now going to call the RRC. It was clear yesterday by the amount of members of the entire club that attended that pickleball event. There were 60 signed up. There were 45, maybe pending rain. Maybe pending rain kept some away, but it was a great event, great community, great energy. And at least for the foreseeable future, and maybe forever, we are going to be more than one racket sport. And so we're kind of working on changing the terminology to a racket section. I know that's going to be very hard. I'm still having a hard time calling it FGS, so I get it. So I'm going to do my best to get used to that language. So created the RRC, Rackets Relocation Committee. Initially, there were 7 members and our general manager. We had a lot of other members of the club, mostly Rackets section members that had expressed interest in being part of that. And so we kept their names on, but in the beginning, we need to be kind of a smaller group to just kind of strategize and figure out where we're going. And so I just wanted to introduce that group. So we had, at that time, we had 4 subcommittees. So we had the finance subcommittee that was led by Lee Einbinder, who is a member of Rackets Golf and Beach. We had a construction subcommittee led by Brad Sedito, who was a member of golf. We had a legal and town relations subcommittee at that time was led by Sal Source, who's a member of Rackets Golf and Beach. Since then, Sal has had other things, and so he is involved, but I've kind of taken part of that over for him, but he's been involved intimately. We had the real estate subcommittee led by Pels Matthews, who is a member of Rackets and Golf. Myself, the president, who's a member of Rackets Golf and Beach. VP Scott Bowman, who's a member of Rackets, and our Rackets chair, Michelle Post, who's a member of Rackets. Are you a member of Beach?
Oh, yeah.
And Beach, Rackets and Beach. So we, last summer, we surveyed the tennis section as to their wants and needs. The RRC took that information, worked on finding a location and putting together a budget for what the Rackets section had asked for. This took quite a lot of time. And so I'm going to ask each one of the chairs to do just a real brief summary of what they did, because this means about going forward. But I'd like to start with Pels, just a real brief summary of real estate and how we've gotten to where we are.
Thanks, Michael. Oops, thanks. So this is a little bit repetitive from the May meeting, but just because not everyone's been on every call or been to every meeting, we did after the survey came back and we sort of established a sort of baseline of what we thought we would want to build for the racket section. We looked at properties, New Milford, Warren, Bethlehem, Morris, Washington, and we tried to find sites that would be appropriate for the physical complex first, which was a challenge unto itself, given topography, zoning, wetlands, all those things. And then we did a lot of analysis around, specifically as we ground that list down to a shorter thing, about time, distance from the club, which was a very important component of the feedback from the survey. There was an overwhelming preference to keep the section in Washington. And so in the end, we ended up just focus on 2 parcels. One was a parcel in New Milford, just over the line by Kimberly Farm, that we actually tried to buy an option on just to buy us time because it was listed on the market. The seller wasn't so interested in that at the price we thought we could offer, but we tried just to try to lock up an option for us. No commitment on our part. And then we also, of course, looked at the site that the club owns on Saturday Lane. And, a lot of discussion happened around, the strengths and weaknesses of both. And there are lots of reasons why in the end, the TRC committee made the recommendation to the Board of Governors to try to move forward with the land that the club already owned in Washington. And some of those should be obvious, cost obviously being the first, because buying a piece of land in Milford adds $1 million+ just to the project, right? Part of it was the desire of the racket section survey to keep the section in Washington. I mean, that was a very, very strong preference of all the preferences in the survey. And for many of us, keeping the club, that's that piece of land, which is now being evaluated, is not the biggest piece of land. And so, whatever happens, if it happens, we'll, I think, keep the club at the same sort of scale. And that's what's important to the membership. And so those are the factors that led to, choosing that site. I mean, we all know it's been looked at before by the club. It was, in the past, it's always sort of been picked as the preferred site. It shouldn't be a surprise. But that's how we got to where we are today on the land.
Perfect. Thanks, Pels.
Lee, would like to come and talk about finance?
As Pell said, this will be a little bit repetitive as well. Oh, sorry. Not as tall as Pell. In my dreams. Okay. So, look, we've been at this obviously over a year, and the things that we've done with finance, obviously the first was getting a handle on the costs, and Brad Sedito has really led that effort with input from not just us, but outside contractors and things like that. And, we've gone back and forth on what the needs are, but we've kind of landed on a base layout, and that has led to a cost estimate. We shared that with you at the last meeting. That hasn't changed. It's $4.2 million. There's a lot of, if I'm sure everyone here has, renovated a home or bought a home or whatever, and they never turn out to be exactly, what you think, but we've tried to build in contingencies and factored in inflation and things like that. So that's our best estimate. This is a multivariable sort of problem that we're dealing with, which is how are we going to fund this? And so, as we talked about in the May meeting, I think we're going to have to take on debt as a club. We've never done that, but 80–90% of clubs have debt. So, sorry, is that better? Okay, I'll just talk to this little mic here. So we're going to have to take on debt, most likely, unless we decide that we want club members to fund the whole thing. And obviously that's a voluntary exercise, but we're not assuming that. So we're going to assume we're going to have debt, and I'll come back and talk. There is some updates on the debt. I'll reference that in a minute. We have club reserves, the sections have reserves. There's a general reserve. And so we can tap those reserves. There is some precedent for sections taking down reserves for different projects. So we can do that. We've talked about a potential ongoing partnership with the gun school. That's still very much sort of up in the air. There have been some discussions. Michael may talk more about that later, but there's potential contributions from the gun school. And in the ideal scenario, they continue with us as partners, and they also can help fund the facility. But we don't really know exactly what that looks like today. And then the other big variables are obviously assessments. We'd like to keep that as low as possible. I think there's likely going to be some kind of assessment, but we're conscious, obviously, of putting a burden on club, in particular racket. We're really talking about racket club member assessments here. And so we're conscious of, what people can afford. And again, we haven't landed on the precise number, but that's something that we may have to consider. And then lastly, which is probably the biggest wild card, and we haven't done any solicitations, and we may or may not decide to do this, but, it's a great town and club, and members have already volunteered to help out. And so we can potentially have donations that would be non-deductible because we're not a charitable institution, or loans or something like that. But again, we haven't started that process, but that's another variable that would bring the assessments down. So those are the different variables. And then just the last thing I would mention is we started having some preliminary discussions with banks over the last month. Jackie Hamilton, who's here, and Alan Levan, who's on the golf committee, joined me, and we had calls with 4 banks, I think, very preliminary. The good news is the banks all have done club loans in the area. Again, we probably are unique that we haven't borrowed. Most clubs in the area have borrowed, and all the banks are familiar with club loans. They view the Washington Club as a very good credit. We've been here for 100 years. We're not going away. And they assume that the club members are going to continue to support the club, which is my strong belief as well. And I think the one fact we weren't sure on, and this was in the Q&A if you folks read it, is they clearly have a preference, and part of this is bank regulatory related, to have some kind of lien on the property. Now, that doesn't mean we have to put a lien on all our club land. We obviously have a lot of valuable land. And again, we don't have this nailed down, but it seems like a likely path is we could subdivide, if we build the rackets facilities on the portion of the club land by the driving range, we can subdivide that land, give the banks a lien on that subdivision, and that should be sufficient. And again, I don't think this scenario in my wildest dreams would ever happen, but from a bank's perspective, that gives them security. So if we borrow a lot of money, the club members don't want to support it for some reason, the banks could technically take that land over, right? And so that lets them sleep at night, and it makes it easier for them, because analyzing club cash flows is not easy. The club has never managed cash flows like a corporation, right? We have member dues every year, and we either reinvest in improvements or we put it in reserves. But we've never managed this as a for-profit company, as an example. So having a lien on probably that portion of the property will get us better terms. So I think there's upside in some of our earlier assumptions on what the debt was going to cost, and the conversations we've had most recently, even though rates are pretty high today, I think as high as they've been in quite some time. Actually, the terms that, again, these weren't definitive terms, but the terms we're hearing from the banks are actually better than what we initially modeled in our assumptions. So I think there's some upside there. So anyway, I will pause there and happy to answer questions then.
Thanks a lot, Lee. I neglected to mention that we are recording this. So those that aren't here, if you see them, this will be eventually posted and you'll be able to review it. Okay, there. Probably, as I'm thinking about this, probably went out of order, but that's my fault. I'd like to have Brad Sedito just briefly discuss the tremendous amount of work that he did to allow us to feel confident that the estimates on all the different pieces of the construction, et cetera, of this proposed facility are accurate. So Brad, just real quick, thanks.
I wasn't prepared to say anything, so I'm gonna be brief.
Sorry,
And that,
real
yeah,
close, real close.
okay. I've been building around town for the last 30 years or so under West Coast of construction and commercial before that, so I pretty much put together.
You have to almost touch it. You gotta get pretty close. There you go. Right in there. Yeah.
Okay, so I put together budgets for both the Milford site and the town site. And I think I'm reasonably accurate on it. I did go out to about a half a dozen different tennis court and racket contractors and got numbers from them. So that's about, I don't know, probably 60% of the project. And the remaining 40% I did conceptually. So I don't think I'm too far off. There wasn't a lot of info to work with. And right now we're in a budgeting phase, not a hard cost or construction phase. So.
Okay, that's all. Yeah, I don't get any more. So, yeah, I mean, from everything from, land, site costs to subs, to the buildings, to concrete, to how much does it cost to put in a driveway here or there with, whatever, Brad got all that. So these are, again, right that it is conceptual, but, per linear foot or per square foot or per acre or whatever, Brad's done a great job at putting that together. So the other, at that time, we had the only other subcommittee was the legal and town relations side. And so a number of us had done some consultations and discussing with zoning and with wetlands and with lawyers that are members of the club and outside. And through that, it does seem that there are paths within Washington to use that land. I mean, as you know, Washington zoning can sometimes be a challenge, and it's definitely not always a guaranteed and a known, right? So, but we feel like that we do have a path through that, and that's discussion with the town hall, plus also folks that have been dealing with Washington zoning for decades. So, getting back to a little bit, as this was back in last summer. So then we surveyed the tennis section members as to their wants and needs. And so that's where we came up with the plans and the estimates that we presented in the last meeting. So the RRC took that information, worked on finding a location, putting together a budget for what they asked for, and that's what took a long time. In the spring, I believe this was in April, we met with the strategic planning committee, which is made up mostly of past presidents and Beth Rickard. And we presented what we thought was the best plan, the one that right before the town meeting, and met with them and to solicit feedback and advice from them. And then we had the town meeting, which was in May 2023. And then at that time presented the best in the town of Washington option, the best out of town option. And the recommendation from this committee was to look at the in-town option. And that was really based on a lot of things, cost, the survey preference, potential zoning hurdles, and we spent a lot of time talking about club culture as well. So after consulting with the town, other lawyers, et cetera, on who do we get to help us to do this, we engaged with Land Tech Engineering, and they have already started evaluating the club-owned land. We also engaged with Land Use Council of Bertram and Moses, and that was the spring. And that's when we involved subcommittee members to really kind of get a little bit deeper into some of these things. And that's when we also created the marketing and communications subcommittee. And we added golf committee, specific golf committee members to the RRC. Now, through this whole process, I, as president, a member of every committee, so I was attending every golf committee meeting and informing them every step of the way where we were on this, and solicited feedback from them and brought that back to our committee for discussion as we were working on coming up with this solution. We also had, I would say, from April probably the last 14 board meetings, majority of our discussion at each board meeting was about this topic. So it's been discussed at a lot of different levels and had a lot of input coming to this. So we added the golf committee members, Jimmy Hurlbert, who is the town clerk over in Roxbury, and so he was he's on the land use legal. The town and legal subcommittee. Alan Levand, who has he's on this finance subcommittee. He's been working really closely with Lee. Has helped a lot. And then Joe Fredlin is on the he's on the facilities. And again, we all got together at these meetings. We would all talk about everything, but we added them. And then we added the marketing communication subcommittee, which is led by Jackie Hamilton, who is a member of Racquets and Beach. And then also on that committee is Matt Mazzala, who's a member of Racquets, Golf and Beach. And then Lisa Gralnick, who's a member of Racquets right over here. So, and so they've just been involved for about a month. And I was just talking with Jackie today, and she realized that it's really just very recently, after a month of a lot of communications, a lot of emails, that she's like, okay, I'm starting to get a handle of this. I mean, and that's why, and we understand that we're talking about a lot of things that we think are common knowledge. That's why we want to come here to you. Are there gaps in our communication? Because we forget that we've been talking about this literally every day for 14 months. So then we have our meeting today with Racquets, today, July 9th. On Monday, tomorrow, we will have a meeting with the engineering firm Land Tech. After they have completed their wetlands evaluation of the land, and then we're going to start a feasibility study based on the Watson needs of the Racquets and the golf sections for their use of that undeveloped land. Now, the beach committee has stated that certainly now and not in time in the future do they have any plans for use of the beach section of that land. So that's why we're talking with mainly with the golf and the Racquets. Am I correct on that, Mark? So, I don't know, global warming, no, that land might be right on the shore. So, goal is to have a feasibility study completed, conceptually within the next few weeks, like in the middle of the summer is what Paul has said. I mean, that's what they said. It wouldn't take too long, a month at the most. So then we're going to evaluate the parts of the land that can handle what uses and discuss with the RRC and at the board level and the use of that land by the sections and what is and then come up, what's the best use of this land that's in the best interest on the club as a whole. And that's really where, the board comes in and looks at that. And we've been discussing that from the beginning. We will then schedule a meeting with non-Racquets members, right? So anybody who's not a Racquets member, and present the plan, and then to hear and answer their specific questions and concerns about how the use of club land by the Racquets section and the golf section, because of this relocation for the Racquets section, how is that, what questions do they have specifically about not being a Racquets member and how it might affect them? And we'll talk about that. Then at that point, the plan is to bring the plan for the use of that land to a club-wide vote. Not required by the bylaws. It just seems right that we talk to all the members of our club and say, we have this land and this is what we propose to do with it. Assuming that a material amount of debt is part of the financial solution, which is right now, that's kind of what we're assuming, unless someone wants to write a check with 6 or 7 zeros or 8 zeros. We'll present the Racquets approved proposal. I'm sorry, I skipped the part. We'll adjust the plan and the budget. Sorry, prior to the club-wide vote. We're going to adjust the plan and the budget based on these meetings with here and with the non-Racquets members. And then we'll adjust the budget and the plan based on that. And then that will come to the Racquets section for a vote. So first we need to say, okay, Racquets, this is what it's going to be. This is what it's going to cost. This is what we feel is going to impact you. Is this what you want? They're going to vote. Hopefully they're going to vote yes, but there'll be a vote. And then we're going to bring that plan to the club-wide vote for the use of that land. Now, assuming that a material amount of debt is part of the solution, we will then present the approved vote of the approved proposal with the financial implications to the full membership for a club-wide vote as defined by the bylaws for taking on material debt. So the plan is to have plans detailed enough to make an application to the required town commissions sometime this fall. And then beyond that, then it's just a matter of going through the steps that are required with the town and, how long it takes for construction and things. And, there's a lot of variables in that, and we're still trying to define those. A lot of them are unknown, right now, but if things go, even if things go as well or as we hope, it may be by, we may be bumping up into the 2026 season or more. Now, we had a recent meeting with the gun school, and there's a little bit of a disagreement about the end of the lease, but we have gotten an agreement that we will be able to use these courts. Initially, it was till June 1st of 2026. We have gotten agreement to use that through the 2026 season. So that, till September. So essentially, that gives us till the start of the 2027 season to have this completed, which was a nice step. That gave us a little bit of more breathing room, because, things do take time. The expectation is that once we can start the construction, all the pools have been made and everything, it's about a 12-month process, for the construction, for the plan that we have, that we are currently talking about. If that changes, well then, if the plan changes, well, that may change. So, I think that's all I kind of have about the process and kind of where we've gone. Is there anything that I should add before we just open it up to questions? Hopefully you all received the FAQs that Jackie and Muzz spent a tremendous amount of time on in the last few weeks, and we wanted to get those out ahead. So I think those went out Friday. Yeah, went out Friday, and they will be posted on the website. So that is a live document. So as we get more questions or as we get different information to some of those questions, some of those answers might change, or there might be additional questions that are added on there. So just so you know, it's we're going to be updating that as soon as we get more information. Yeah, we from this meeting through the Ask the Board at washingtonclub.net, we want to hear your feedback. Review those, look at them, think about it. Oh, it doesn't quite answer. This isn't clear. Have you thought about this? Did you do that? All those kinds that we want to hear. And we've been hearing it, the whole time. So, and we have been listening to that. So, and a lot of adjustments have been made because of suggestions. There have been some blind spots and we've been alerted to those and we've adjusted that. And there may be others. So, we encourage your involvement, from all of our members on this. Anything else before we get to Q&A? Cool. Just want to thank the whole committee for all the work. Okay. Question number 1, Mark Blair.
Thanks, Mike, and to the committee members. Every time I'm with you in public, someone comes up to you and suggests another piece of property. Could you or Pels articulate rough numbers, not an audit, but rough numbers, how many different properties across all of the different geographies you've listed you guys have thought through and evaluated, just so people can have a sense for how wide the aperture was at the start of the process and continues today?
Yeah. So if I just in my head think here at Bethlehem, there were 3 sites that were visited, that were looked at sort of seriously. In Morris, there was 1 site that was looked at. In New Milford, there were 2 sites looked at. In Washington, there were 2 sites there were 2 sites that we went to see. One was potential partnership with Rumsey Hall School on some land they owned. Again, do we want to be in a position or a tenant? We don't think so, right? So, there were other sites in Washington that were considered either extremely cost prohibitive or the owners simply were not interested in selling. So I probably personally approached 5 owners of parcels and just a hard no, just so it give you a sense. So
Right, but in terms of looking at geography, size, et cetera, how large was the number before forgetting about you guys going out and
Oh,
looking
yeah,
at.
I mean,
Topography.
we looked at least 30 sites that were available with an acreage and potentially enough flat land, and probably 10 of those were eliminated for various reasons right away, wetlands. I mean, there's a site in Woodbury on the Bethlehem line, just 22 minutes from, time really became a limiting factor. We really tried to keep things to 15 minutes or less. So that was a big reason for the limited number, but it was still, in the end, probably saw 10, 12 sites.
Yeah, and that's narrowed down from, I would often get, hey, look on Zillow, you got this, you got this, and look at it, I send it on to Pels, and I mean, this is what he does every day, all day, and he's like, yeah, I saw that one, it's not gonna work, because boom, 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 boom. And so, I mean, it might have been a quick email with like 30 words total. It was evaluated, but it was pretty quickly like, all right, that's not gonna work. But we looked at all those, anything that anybody had sent us, we looked at that. So good question. Yes, Lisa.
It's a bit of insider trading.
This is Lisa Groundek.
A bit of insider trading since I'm on the marketing communications subcommittee. And I apologize for being late. I think something that's come up and that's been discussed actively is what this is going to include. And I know we don't have final answers, but what is in the model right now for the first phase and the second? Because I think everyone's always interested.
Great question, Lisa. So the question was, what exactly are we talking about in terms of the facilities that we're discussing? What's in it? And like we said, it was based on lots of conversations, the survey, the use of the courts and interest. So we're talking about currently, we're talking about 10 tennis courts. The makeup right now would be 6 hard troop, 6 clay, and 4 all weather. Now, I don't know if I have it on the FAQs, but all weather courts just mean just that. So we've moved on from hard because the courts that they make now that we're considering are called post tension courts, and they're concrete, but they have cables running in the middle of them, holding that concrete tight. And if you've been paying attention at all to our hard courts, every 2 years these cracks are opening up, and it's a lot of maintenance. These courts have a 25-year warranty guarantee. If cracks form, they're going to come and fix them. They have a rubberized top on the top of it, and you can't slide like hard shoe, but it's a very comfortable all-weather surface. And then 6 hard shoe courts. Right now, we're talking about 2 dedicated pickleball courts. 2 of the all-weather courts will also be lined for pickleball, so there'll be 4 pickleball courts and 2 platform tennis courts. The reason we were including that is, one, there was a desire through the survey to do that. And then also it expands the value of your membership to the winter. The options, winter options. That was another thing in both of the surveys that we've done in the last several years was, can we have something that happens after Labor Day and before Memorial Day? And so that is a way to do that. The other advantage of those platform courts, pickleball continues the way it is. Seems like we're behind the rest of the country, maybe even the rest of the world, is you can get tiles put on those platform courts and have an additional 2 pickleball courts as well. So then you could have 6. So that's what we're talking about in terms of the courts. We're talking about a 2-sided hitting wall and a modest tennis shack that has a small office, a gathering area, bathrooms with a shower, and storage. That's about a little warming area for the platform test because it's a winter thing. So it's small. I don't know. We're talking 12 by 12, or it's not that big. Am I missing anything substantial? I mean, obviously there's the site and all that sort of stuff, but at this state, we're not talking about indoor. We're not talking about, lights. We're not talking about, I mean, lights obviously for the platform. I mean, that has to happen, but no, right now we're not talking about lights for the tennis courts. That's it, Scott. Yeah, so that's a good point. So talk about pickleball real quickly. The biggest issue nationally or in the pickleball world, wherever, is the noise of pickleball. Okay. And that is a real concern, the noise that pickleball makes. there has been tremendous advancements that are happening and they're continuing to happen to reduce that disruption. So there are new balls. I don't know, Paul, have we purchased some of the new balls yet? Are they out? Yeah, so we have a prototype of these balls that make less noise. There are rackets now that significantly reduce the decibel level of the racket hitting the ball. And another one of the biggest improvements there are screens, we call them wind screens, but can't see through them, but they are acoustic screens and they absorb the noise. I have a text from Kenny that said he did a little bit of research about how far that noise travels, with these with these screens, and it's tremendous. One little anecdote that Paul had given me from a housing development in Ohio that I think is really telling about how this technology has changed the landscape is there was a housing development wall right in the middle of this housing development. Everyone was all up in arms. There's so much noise. So the HOA met and they said, you cannot play pickleball, but 9 to 5, or, it was a day window. And that was it. And they banned it outside of those hours. Since then, this technology came out. They bought the ball. They bought 150 of these noise reduction paddles. They put up the soundproofing. After some time, the HOA got back together and like, you know what? You guys can play pickleball whenever you want. So this was a group that was very anti-pickleball because of the noise. The change was so dramatic. They came back and was like, you guys can play whenever you want. So there are big changes, and I got to assume that those changes are going to continue. And that's a big question. That's a question for folks that are playing tennis. There are folks that are just hanging out. There are folks that are playing golf. If it's up there, all these, I get it, but there's a lot of improvements. So, thanks, Scott, for that question. Yeah, Phil Farmer.
Thank you, Michael. I applaud your efforts, Michael, and that of the various committees of the racket sports. The level of communication has been continuous and very helpful. I noticed in my email that there's a meeting coming up that's being led by the golf section on July 23rd. I don't know whether that is to collect information from golfers and tennis members who are across that border, or it's just going to be a top-down, this is what we're going to do. But as a golfer, I do not feel that that my opinion has been solicited. I don't think a lot of other people's opinions have been solicited. And it would be my urging of all tennis members, racket members who also happen to be golf members, perhaps it would be really good to show up and learn what's being said and also voice our concerns as to what we want as a One Washington Club.
Phil, that's a very good point. So the meeting on the 23rd is being held by the golf committee, and they are, that's Ethlyn's meeting, and she has an agenda for that. My understanding is that it's a golf committee meeting that is open to, she had told me that's open to the entire club. So I think that's, as far as I can tell, kind of, the first option to find out exactly what the golf section as a whole would like in this. And we've been asking this for a while, and now it's coming. So that's good. It's a good move. So I think, yep.
Yeah, my question relates to finance.
Yep.
My question relates to finance. So I understand that the goal is to minimize capital assessments on racket members, which I think is great. But given that the estimated cost is $4.2 million and the tennis reserve is only $400,000, I don't see how that's possible. So when capital assessments are actually made in 2024, do you expect a big drop off in membership? And wouldn't that put a very big financial burden on the remaining members? And are you going to ask for a capital commitment from the racket members so that we know how many people are willing to pay? And are you planning to do that? And when do you plan to do so? And my second question relates to what Lee just said about tapping into general club reserves, which is great if we can do that. But wouldn't that be a loan that has to be repaid? So it doesn't really fill the gap.
Okay, you just got both
Yeah,
questions.
so Jane, let me answer your good question. So the last one I'll answer first because I still can remember it. There is precedent for sort of different sections borrowing from each other. And I think in the past it's been interest free, but it does get repaid. And so that's obviously a board decision. And I think the presumption would be, and it would be subordinated to any bank debt. And the presumption that would be that you'd probably want to pay that back as quickly as possible out of excess cash reserves. But the luxury of that is because it is intra-club, that we could probably be sort of lenient on the terms in terms of interest and when it gets paid back. But the intention would be to pay it back as soon as possible.
Put that in the past. Just to finish up with that and I'll let him get to the next question. Yeah, in the past, club-wide reserves have been borrowed by other sections at zero interest and it was paid back. Yeah, it was a loan. It's not a gift. Yep. It would be replenished.
Yeah, and in terms of your question about assessments, I mean, I've got 20 different models on my computer that we modeled here. I've got models that show zero assessment, just so you know, right? So it's not, the reason why we haven't gone to the membership yet to say, here's what we think the assessment is going to be, is we still have some variables, including, is gun school going to contribute or not, right? That's a big variable. We had some, as I mentioned earlier, some very productive meetings with the banks last week. I think we showed this last time, but I think we had modeled in originally about $1.5 million of bank debt. We actually think we can borrow more, probably significantly more. Now, we may not want to because the more debt we borrow, the more that puts a burden on ongoing, dues every year that the tennis members are going to have to pay. But that's, we have to weigh sort of the pros and cons of that. But we can take on more debt that can minimize the capital assessment, but that's going to increase the dues. So that's some of the, equations we're trying to balance. And that's why we haven't landed on a specific number yet. Did I answer your questions, all your questions, Jane? Yep. Oh, so in terms of, and I, in terms of, we have, and again, I think I'm speaking on behalf of multiple committees here. No decisions have been made on assessments yet and when they're going to be assessed. But, again, I tells here, but there could be an assessment next year. I don't think that there's been any formal decision on that. Once we know kind of, and we actually talked about this last year, there was sort of open discussion. And one of the things we talked about was, let's get a handle on what that total assessment is going to be, even if it's staged. And so this could be a multi-year, it could be over 2 or 3 years, whatever, we haven't decided. But I think if we're going to assess people, they're going to want to know, okay, what am I looking at here, right? You don't want to surprise people. And so those are the things we're thinking about.
I mean, I think there's, just to be, I think there's a fair chance that there will be an assessment in 2024, but what Lee is saying is that there's still things we don't know about it, but I think if you prep for it and it doesn't happen, then that's great. So we don't want to commit to that. Scott, do you have some? Yeah, that's a good point. Scott mentioned, how do we look at total debt? So some of the discussions with the banks has really only been like in the last week and a half. And so we really haven't had a chance to really flush out that, but it sounds like it may have significantly changed the landscape of what we're able to borrow. So, but at the board level, once we figure out what this club can borrow as a whole, the board will look at what the needs are of our different sections and of the administration of this building and such, and what kind of debt are we going to need to have access to going forward, whether it's in the near term or even farther, and then look at the requests from the different sections and then equitably use that debt so that it provides the help for the Racquets section, but it doesn't unduly burden any of the other sections to access debt that they need or may need in the future. That's kind of what we're talking about. Yes. Is that clear on that? Yeah. So. Eric.
First,
Eric DeWalter.
shocking, I would have a question. I wanted to tag on to what Phil said. That was the meeting in 2 weeks with golf membership. And I'm on the tennis committee, so everybody knows that. One of the first things we did, I think like 9 months ago, is we did a survey of what the tennis membership wants, not what the tennis committee needs, what the membership wants. That gave us very clear direction. Want to be in Washington, want hard true courts, want pickleball. All those things came out. I really, really think the golf membership needs to be surveyed in the same way, even before this meetings take place, so that we hear loud and clear, 1 vote per person, 1 vote per family who's a golf member, what they want. Because what we're hearing now is very loud from a small number of golf members that are against it. And I think you'd find just by the fact that 75% of golf members are also tennis members.
45.
There's a cross section of people that assumingly, if you're a member of both, you are pro having both sports. So I think it is very remiss. We've not done a golf survey yet. And I know the reason why it's not been done. You can answer that if you want.
Yeah, I'll answer.
Know the answer to the question, and that needs to be addressed. That survey has to be done so that we actually know factually what the golf membership wants. So that was why I first raised my hand.
Yeah.
But my other comment to, sorry, I don't hear first. Jane, to tag on what Jane said, I think that we have to be really, really careful with assessments and how much they are. There's a core group of tennis members that play daily, weekly, whatever, but there's a lot of people that belong that don't really use our facilities that much. And I think we have to be very cautious of not losing them as members, alienating them as members because of a significant assessment, which may cause them to not rejoin or to drop out. We lost 15 members, I believe, this year. We don't know why. We're, as a committee, in the process of asking why they left. But I think it's a real danger of losing members that are on the, let's say, less active side, but still active. And that changes the dynamic of the club in many, many ways, most of which are not good. And also how we spread the expense of covering whatever it is that we build.
Yeah, good question. So I'm gonna answer that. So let me take the first one, and I think that's what Phil was getting at, and what you're getting at is, for quite some time, I've asked the golf committee, and those of you that are on the board of governors know this, to get a gauge of the entire golf membership. One thing that's unique about the Washington Club that also creates a lot of our challenges is that we are a club, but we have separate sections. And for 100+ years, we have respected as much as we can the autonomy of those sections to run their sections as they feel is appropriate for the members of our club that are parts of the sections. Now, the board, the idea of the board is to oversee and make sure that you can do, beach, you can do your thing, and golf, you can do your thing, and tennis, you can do your thing. But it also has to fit within the values and the vision and the mission of the club and the ethos and all of that stuff, right? So respecting the autonomy of the section is important. It may be 10 months or 11 months that the request has been made to the golf section to solicit input and share and get ideas about what the golf section members want as a whole. We faced a lot of pushback on that. I say pushback, you just say a big concrete wall. We've even, I've been at every golf committee meeting and said, why don't you do a survey? Why don't you do a survey? And then at the last golf committee meeting, while they were proving a point based on information that came out of our survey, my next question was, well, I think we need to do a survey of golf members. And the answer was, you can't get information from surveys. It doesn't really matter. You can't get information from surveys because surveys don't really matter. It doesn't matter. So I wasn't exactly sure where to go from there because it felt, I was, okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out where you're coming from. So I hear you. Now, there's going to be a golf committee meeting. This is the first time that the golf committee has chosen to have a meeting with its members. So I applaud that part of it. We're going to see how that goes and where it comes and getting information. I still believe that it needs to be a survey. I'm going to give one more go. And if that doesn't happen very shortly, the club is going to send out a survey that's going to go to all members. In the survey, you can say, I'm in this section, I'm in this section, I'm in this section. Based on the sections that you're in, your questions will fit to what section you're in, and we will get that information that you're looking for and that we need. Maybe I've been too patient. I hope that, sorry. And then I want to go to the assessment thing, the assessment. This has been a big discussion from the beginning, right? One of the things that's really important about this club is that it's accessible. The fact that you can join one section and another and not the whole thing makes it accessible to a lot more people. Our club is much more vibrant because people don't have to drop down 30 grand and be a member and have those dues every time and have food minimums and all that sort of stuff. The barrier to entry is low relative to other clubs that provide what we provide. So we're discussing about different ways to make sure that we can still be available to the members that are going to be there. Now, the value of your membership is going to go up because we are going to have facilities that are our own. You will be able to take a shower and change. You will be able to play tennis without having to ask the Frederick Gun School for permission. You know, all these kinds of things are our season can essentially now go from the beginning of April or even year round, so from the all weather courts through to November, right? So we have it's going to increase. So there will be some increases because there's going to be an increased operating costs to that. Other clubs have been creative about having some kinds of sliding scales based on a lot of different factors, age, years in the club, other ways, and to be creative so that we can maximize retention as best we can and be a place that's going to be attractive to new members. I personally feel that yes, there will be some members that'll be like, you know what, it's just not right for me. We're going to do our best to make that as close to zero as possible. I think zero is unrealistic, but it's on our minds. But number two, we are going to have a facility that I think will also attract other people. And it'll be, you know, the fact that the section has been growing and we have a road driving right through the middle of our section, have a bathroom that is functional, but it stops there, right? We don't have storage, we don't have running water. I mean, the fact that the tennis staff can hold events and they don't have a sink, like that's amazing that we've been able to be as vibrant as we are with that. But when we have, we're not talking about something huge. When we have what I believe is the bare minimum to have a tennis section, I think that's even going to be more appealing to more people. Plus the growth of pickleball, plus adding the platform. This is all within the budget. Those things our models we've been talking about a really significant, you know, so that we're looking at the worst case scenario, loss of members. I think our net's going to, you know, once it flushes out, is going to be positive because we're going to be adding things and we're going to be more inclusive to other sports and things. So it's on our minds. We're working on it. Thank you for stating that. So I don't know if I rambled on too long, but I felt like all that is important to hear. So, sorry. Yes. Oh, we have some questions online. So let's touch base with the Zoom ones. Would Racquets members have access to the golf clubhouse? The sections are still going to be separate. So Racquets members will have access to Racquets facilities. Golf members will have access to golf facilities. The golf clubhouse has been used by the club for club-wide events. So in that sense, yes, it will. My feeling is that that's not going to change. I mean, I don't. So, from SW, my question relates to finance. Condominiums boards usually try to spread the financial burden of long-term capital projects over the predicted useful life of the projects so that the current owners don't bear a disproportionate burden. That usually means borrowing for as long a term as possible. To support those loans, the revenue stream of the condominium is pledged as collateral. Some banks specialize in this type of finance. I handled one of these for our condo in New York City. I think the same principle applies to clubs like ours, where those who happen to be members today should not be expected to pay for facilities that will be enjoyed over a long period of time. To that end, could all club revenues, rather than just rackets section revenues, be pledged for such a loan? Lee, do you understand the question and can you answer?
Yeah, I think if we were at the golf meeting in 2 weeks from now, they would not want to pledge all cash flows to the bank. I think it's still an unknown. Well, let me answer the first part and I'll come back. Our intention really is to borrow as long as possible, which I think gets to the first part of that question. And that's probably gonna be 20 to 25 years. That's what banks are willing to lend. So I'm fairly confident that's what the term of the loan is going to be. Now, we're going to be able to pay it back. Most of these loans are will reprice either after every 5 or after every 10 years. So it'll be fixed for 5 years or 10 years, then will be repriced. And there may be prepayment penalties if interest rates come down, or if we get to the end of that 5 or 10 year term, there's no prepayment penalty. So I'm getting to details, but our clear intention is to borrow as long as possible. As I said earlier, you're likely going to have to put a lien on the specific area because, club cash flows, I think, are, even less reliable than, apartment or condominium cash flows where you're looking at reliable rents and things like that. So I think having the security, the lien will give comfort to the banks. They are going to look at the cash flows of the club. And if, as I said earlier, if the club defaults, right? If we can't pay the loan every year, the bank will be able to take the facility back. That's basically their recourse. So that's how we're approaching it. And did I miss another part of the question? It's a long question.
That's it.
That's it.
We were just thinking about like the length of it, and who pays.
Which is current members are going to pay for with assessments, and future members are getting this stuff free. Future members are going to pay.
Oh, yeah.
Numbers.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, right now we've. Yeah. I'll try to rewrite. We have, again, our base models are pretty conservative. I was saying this to Michael last night. We've never thought about managing the club for profit. And I'm not suggesting we're going to do that going forward, but we're going to have to start being creative. And, if all club members are enjoying pickleball, what does that mean, right? What does that mean to what we charge the membership and how do we do that? The assessments, to Scott's point, is we're going to likely increase. Again, it hasn't been determined, but, we have new member assessments for all the sections now. And certainly for brackets, those assessments are only going one way, right? They're going to have to go up. And again, we haven't modeled in right now, to Michael's point, hopefully, this can be a great facility with top of the line courts in the area that people are going to want to use and more people will want to join. And we're going to have higher assessments that will, enable us to have more cash. And again, we could pay off if we have borrowings from other reserves or we want to pay down the debt, et cetera. But the objective is, again, we could borrow a lot of money, as Michael pointed out, or maybe Scott earlier. I think the board is going to be mindful of how much debt do we want to incur, and we want to make sure that if golf wants to put in an irrigation system and borrow $1 million, next year, that they have the capacity to do that if they want to as well.
Yeah, I mean, in many clubs, you know, you have your new member assessment and you have your contribution each year to the improvement fund, right? And that all kind of goes into your capital fund. When there's an assessment on the membership, whether that's in improvement funds annually or a special assessment, that money should be tacked right onto the new member assessment. And so that new member assessment comes up. So say, for example, I'm just running a number. Say there's an assessment of $3,000. Boom. And the member that comes in the next year, their new member assessment is $3,000 more. I don't know if it's exactly that number, but that's kind of the idea, right? So I think answers the concern about future members and that people will pay. I don't know, and you know, back to my point about possibly sliding scale. You know, there are scales where, you know, if you've been a member for a certain amount of years, plus you're a certain age, that at a point after that, the assessment goes down because your use of that new facility that assessment's paying for is a shorter period of time, or maybe, right? So, you know, I've spoken to a lot of members who are also members of Billsbridge. They just did that, and they had some kind of a curve sliding scale based on age and other things. So, yeah, we're looking at that. So you know what, I'm going to finish the online ones because I've been waiting, and then we'll get right to you. Okay, there's one more online question. Well, that one's going to wait a second. This one's from Alan Leathers. I know you had a meeting recently with FGS. They will need, scroll it down a little bit. They will need courts, and I would think it makes sense for them to have 6 adjacent all-purpose courts for matches and also to partner with the Washington Club. As we have talked at length, wondering what their take is on this process. It would save both parties a great deal of money if that partnership is maintained. In our last meeting with FGS, they had stated that there was a willingness, at least, what they said, do what's right for the Washington Club. And if that is something that works for us to partnership, we will partner with you. And that's kind of where we are. I'm not sure what more to say. That we did bring up the fact that you have 6 courts for a match. But again, and I think that was probably good advice. Let's do what's right for the Washington Club, and if it makes sense to partner with FGS, then we will. And that's both parties, I think, need to look at it that way, because this is for us. You know, we've kind of moved on about creating something for the Washington Washington Club, create something specifically for FGS. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay. And then I'll get to.
Thanks. First of all, I wanted to thank the steering committee for all the time and work and skills that you guys have brought to bear. It's really good work. I wanted to echo some of the comments from the other side of the room, that I think what many of us love about the Washington Club is how accessible it is to many, many different types of people, both in terms of age range, skill level of participation, financial means, all of that. And I think that's something that we really want to preserve as much as we can. Frankly, that's what many of us love about Washington in general, and why we want to be here, and why we have residents who've been here all their lives and people who more recently joined. And so, you know, there are 2 other clubs in not a very far away distance that are kind of shinier, fancier, different types of, you know, their personality is a little bit different. And I think it would be a shame for us to lose what's so special about the Washington Club, which is that I think lots of many different types of people can both feel comfortable here, not just financially, but also in terms of the personality and the spirit and the character of the club, and that many people feel very comfortable interacting with people who are different from them in lots of ways. So I think that's really important, and I hope we pay a lot of attention to that. I think it's great. We want to have fantastic facilities, but I wouldn't want to over-index on that at the cost of keeping it a very down-to-earth, approachable, accessible, inclusive, and considerate club for everybody. The other question I had, and you guys might have answered this, but I'm not sure if I'm totally clear. Will the membership know what their financial commitment will be before the vote happens?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that whoever partakes in that vote, once they voted, they're committed to that financial contribution.
Yes, and we were discussing that. I know there's been some requests that an affirmative vote comes with some financial ties, some financial commitment. We haven't discussed that specifically yet. So that's something that has recently been presented to us, and we just haven't had time to have a meeting to talk about how that would work, Scott. Here.
But just to be specific, a vote that is of the tennis section to approve a financial model which may have X assessment and Y increase in dues will impact the entire section. If you vote no and the overall section votes yes, there'll still be the obligation. So it's not like only the people that vote yes take on the obligation, just to be really clear.
Follow up on that?
My specific question is, if you vote yes, you are then committed to that financial obligation. If you vote no, do you then have the option to leave the club and not fund that obligation?
I think someone has the option to leave the club whenever, they choose. So, I mean, we're assuming that everyone's going to have enough information that they'll be able to make that decision. So I guess your question is, if someone votes yes and would leave the club because they voted yes and then didn't want to, yeah. Yeah,
I'm assuming you need a certain level of commitment that the funding will be there from assessments.
right.
But you also don't want to require people who maybe can't afford that to make that commitment. So at some point, it seems like you need that information, you need a vote. And at that vote, people need to know if they're committing or not. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't, it's gonna be the answer to this. Maybe Lee's the finance guy for this a little bit better.
Yeah, you're asking a great question, and it's sort of a tricky question, because at the end of the day, we're going to be in 2027 or 2026, or whatever, when your dues are going up. Now, we may have, as Michael said, we may have assessments starting next year. We haven't made a decision. Regardless of how you vote, you may decide, you know what, this is not for me, and I'm not going to be a club member. So I would separate out sort of the vote from what you do personally, because it's like, anyone at any time could decide to leave the club. And so I think what we want to do is give members as best of an idea as possible about what this is going to look like. But at the end of the day, everyone's going to, decide what they want to do. So, which has nothing to do with the vote, if you will.
But so then what does happen? Let's say there's a vote and there's a financial impact and we do lose a lot of members, then how do those costs get borne by the remaining members?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's something we've been. Yeah, look. Great question. I mean, we've gone around this question many times, which is why I think we want to, get a sense of what the membership could bear. One, what do we need? What can the membership bear? And everyone's situation is different, right? So, I'm highly confident we're going to make this work. I'm less, if you ask me exactly how it's going to work, I'm not sure. And I'm the finance guy, right? Because there's lots of variables. And at the end of the day, we want to make this work for hopefully everybody, but it may not be perfect.
I mean, I think the assessment is going to come before you step foot on that first court. So, I mean, I think it's reasonable for us to have made a decision. Yes, we're going to go forward with this, and not as soon as possible start collecting that assessment. It may not be all upfront, but the construction costs are going to be coming along the way, and people know when that's going to come. So. Yeah, it's a tough question, but the idea is that as soon as we are set, yes, this is what we're going to do, and we have an idea of what money we're going to get from the memberships, we're going to start saying, okay, we need X amount of dollars. We're going to start here, and if someone feels like they don't want to be part of that at all, they're going to be out sooner, and yeah, we would have to adjust. But tying it explicitly together is a challenge. Yeah. Yeah, yes, quite. Oh, who was next? Yes, yeah, go ahead. And then the back question.
Hi, one comment and one question. The comment about the survey possibilities with the golf club. is it possible that the leadership isn't technically savvy with sending out surveys? It's just it's just maybe an observation. Maybe there's some resistance around that. I don't know. I don't play golf. I
No.
don't know anything. So there's that, you know,
I-
people have all different reasons for not doing things, and that could be a barrier.
That's
That's my
refreshing.
comment.
That's a refreshing point of view.
My
It's-
second.
it's-
I don't
it's
think
not-
anybody-
It's not correct.
Okay, okay, great. Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, secondly, I don't know much about fundraising in general, but I have 3 kids in private schools, and there's a lot of creative ways that schools raise money. And my question is, in the spirit of creatively raising money, we're just talking about assessments and club dues and bank loans. Are we allowed to have events where we raise money? And I know you guys, we would love to have a anonymous donation, just somebody write a check, but I know for my family, if there was a party, we would come and we would donate some money, but I don't know how to do that. Just coming and writing a check to you. And is it allowed? We get a fund, like a subcommittee, a party subcommittee, or a fundraising
Yeah.
subcommittee, or
Pels has agreed to run that. Been running a lot, so he's got a lot of experience. Yes, do we have a second? All in favor? No, it's all right. I think that's a great idea. The nonprofit organizations and schools do that all the time, and it's a way to have fun and to get the energy and camaraderie together and get excitement and energy about it, and give ways for everybody to contribute what they can in a way if they want, right? So when you can have a silent auction, you can have a reverse auction, you have these kinds of things. And the folks that are like, oh my God, this is most I can give is X dollars. And then someone else is like, most I can give is 10X dollars. And everyone's feel comfortable and they're contributing. So that's a very interesting, that's a great idea. We haven't got to that. Jackie loves it. Jackie is Pels' subcommittee co-chair. I think we have one in the back and then we're coming up.
So I might have missed this, but what are we optimizing for? Are you optimizing to keep dues pretty much the same? And what is the order of operations? Like, is Club Hall looked at to sell so that we can keep dues constant?
It's a very good question.
I have a 2-part question.
Yeah, so I don't know if we've kind of even got, we're optimizing, we're trying to provide the facilities that the club the tennis section has said they wanted, and then kind of looking at the finances for that.
Because I think there should be a vote on that.
Or Pels answer this.
I actually think there should be a vote on that. Like, what percentage of the membership wants to optimize to keeping dues flat?
Yeah, so again, this is, because we're having this.
More specific.
Yeah, so this is sort of live
What
discussion.
did you get back?
Yeah, this is active discussion, and there'll probably be another survey at some point, and we haven't decided what's going to be in that survey, but that would be a great question. And so you're right, some people may like assessments, some people probably don't like either one of these, but on a relative basis, there is a trade-off, assessments and ongoing dues. We have to try to find the right balance. So Pels, I think you were going to add something, but there is a balance there, and we're not, right now, we're optimizing to try to keep both as low as possible is the simple answer. But at the end of the day, there are going to be some trade-offs. So for example, as I think you're astutely pointing out, we could borrow more debt, lower the assessments, but that means dues have to go up, right? That's just simple math.
Yeah, because that's in line with our values, right? So like, whatever the values of the clubs are, or if the club doesn't value taking on debt, then we should.
And I think one of the things we're trying to be mindful of is, trying to, in our own minds, sort of, again, we start with hopefully a 0 assessment, but also kind of what's the max that we think people can reasonably bear? And there's something in between. And the same thing with dues, right? You start with, do we have to increase them? Michael's already said they're going up. and we're gonna have better facilities, but how much do they have to go up? So. Kelsey?
There needs to be some sort of sensitivity analysis to understand the attrition, right? If dues go up by 20%, are we gonna, have an attrition of 20% in membership? Because then the rest of us have to pick up the balance.
100% right.
Yeah, Mona, I mean, look, I want to give everybody, everyone has to have a little perspective of history on this a little bit. I mean, we play for free, right? We pay zero lease rent. We don't pay utilities. We don't pay taxes. We don't pay for insurance. I mean, our budget to run our club is very, very low because of a very unique situation. Golf sits on land that was donated to the club by members. The beach sits on land that was donated to the club by members, right? We are at a place now where if we have made the decision, I think the club has, that tennis is a valuable component of our club. There are modern day costs to acquire, build, and operate that section. And there's no getting around that, right? We're gonna start paying our own electricity bill. We're gonna have to drill wells. We're gonna have to do all these things that we haven't had to do before. And everyone here is talked about and been sensitive to the culture of our club, the openness. The running joke when I moved here was that the postman plays golf with a billionaire. And I love that, right? And I love that at tennis, at the beach, at golf. But this is just reality, right?
100%. Like I want what you want, but I think that transparency around how you guys are making decisions needs to be there.
Correct. And so the scale of what is sort of the base model today is based on feedback of the survey. And when the membership, the tennis racket section is asked, will you support this financially? If the overwhelming response is no, we're going to have to reassess that, right? But we need to, if this is what the membership asks for, we need to price it out. We need to ask the membership.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine a situation where there is no assessment and no dues increase. I personally can't imagine it because I don't want to say free riding, but things have been cheap for us because of our past situation. I wish to God we had charged every member $800 a year.
That's not, this is not what I'm asking.
No, but
I'm saying like, that's
model,
fine, but I think
but
it's.
yes, we understand that when there's even a $500 assessment, we're going to lose some numbers, right? We know that's going to happen. And some of the models have 20-25% attrition, right? But we also think, as Michael said, there will be new members who may replace some of those members because the facilities would be slightly different if this model is built, right? So, I don't think there's any way we can come up with a guaranteed solution for the membership, right? There's always risks. There's a risk to every section of this club that half the section resigns next year, right? It could happen at any time. And I don't think it would be possible for us to model it down to every nickel, right? We are going to have a little bit of a leap of faith at some point. And I think between the survey we did, the survey / vote that will ask the racket section, will you support this financially? We just have to make a decision to move forward. Otherwise, we get stuck in paralysis by analysis. We will end up without tennis. And I just don't think that's a solution that we're looking for. And I hope I missed your point.
Well, you were just explaining me your opinion. I'm just saying, what are you optimizing for? The other question I have is yes, we are ignoring gun, but we have a lot of power with the gun school and they want to use our golf course. They want to use probably our tennis course. They don't have any real estate for building that stuff. And if you're a prep school, you need tennis courts. So, I think we should ignore them, but I think that there's a huge opportunity to apply pressure and extract value from them.
There have been conversations on that front. The school actually probably has more flexibility than most people realize. Right. I do a lot of work with the school on real estate stuff. They do intend to leave some courts here, by the way, that will not be available to us, full stop. And they own a fairly large chunk of land on South Street where with probably a little litigation, they could build another 4 or 5 tennis courts. So they have an option without us, frankly. Golf interaction with the gun school is going to be up to the board in golf to work out. It would be very challenging in today's political environment for tennis to turn around and tell golf, you got to strong arm FGS. The same with the beach. The beach has a relationship with FGS that I think is frankly way one-sided FGS. But I appreciate that point. Whenever I do the math, when we're in meetings, I'm personally knocking off 20% of the tennis members when I start to figure out what could we raise for assessment. So there is definitely a sensitivity to this fact. I don't think we have set any expectation, but part of that will be set once we ask everyone, would you financially support this proposal that was driven by the initial survey?
How many members do you have? Should go in part and parcel with the.
Yeah. Right. And so what we've been doing is we've been looking at the dues that people are paying for other tennis clubs in the area. So Edgewood, New Milford, Highfield, the Middlebury Club. If we have a facility that's frankly better than those facilities at slightly more cost, we think there's a real chance we may attract a bunch of those members. So we are doing work to look at that. I can't tell you what the number is, right? I know, I'm just saying. Yeah, so, I mean, yeah. No, we're not based on flat membership.
I'm trying to keep it flat. You can't do that. I'll do some one more online question, then we'll get to Ann. One thing is that just this week, a potential survey questions Lee had started kind of going about that gets to some of those things. How much would you be willing to pay the dues, and what's your likelihood and things. So we've been talking about that. So we're going to try to get that. I think it's going to be I think the best is a combination from surveys and forums like this that we'll get to that. So.
I think it's okay to say what you want,
Yeah.
We're not gonna increase. Well, they're
going to increase. We don't know how much. The current models could be as much as double. The assessment could be as much as $5,000, but correct. Yeah. But obviously, there's membership costs to that. Some people are going to leave, and we're going to start to feel that as we have more of these conversations. Top of the one, Chris Canizares. Also, is the club considering increasing the services available to golf and rackets members so as to take advantage of the relocation of the racket sections to golf's neighbor and the resultant economy of scale? For example, offering refrigerated bottled beverages, energy bars, and so forth. This is a service that would benefit members of both sections equally and would require no considerable additional labor. It has been discussed at board level and with, specifically, we're talking about rackets and tennis, about how do we optimize it. The golf section has discussed, contrary to what has been said in some communications, for over a year, maybe a year and a half, they've been talking about having a building up there with a training center, possibly a small office for Corey, and to give lessons. So in some of our discussions, we're like, hey, if we work together, we'll do this construction at the same time. There's going to be a savings of cost. Have a bathrooms that could be shared. We could have storage and things like that. So there have been discussions at that level. Right now, no, I'm just going to leave it at that. Hopefully that answers your question, Chris. But yes, we have been discussing that. There have been some challenges around that, but we're working for it. Thanks for the answer. The thing with using initiation fees from new members is the timing. You don't have them when you need them to pay the project costs. They could be used to repay loans, but not likely for initial funding. Correct. Please, can we just proceed with that all section survey immediately so that the results are in well before the golf section meeting on July 23rd? Seems like a missed opportunity for the golf section leadership not to know what that section is concerned about before holding a meeting that is designed to address their concerns. No, I agree with you 1000%. Can we get a survey together in the next 2 weeks? I don't think so. Right now, there's been an agreement that that meeting is going to happen. And I think that's the best way, at least for the next 2 weeks, and see how that meeting goes. So, but I hear you. I think that's all online for right now. Yeah, Ann. Oh, did I miss it? Hold on. Just to finish, Craig, just to finish this question, and Ann's been waiting. Chat, where's the chat? Did we skip over one?
That was the question. Said it was.
Yeah, I think it's all there. You can look and see if you can find it, but
Does the golf section have the power to refuse the tennis's use of that land?
the question is, does the golf section, the golf committee, or the golf section as a whole, have the authority or the right to refuse the use of that land for non-golf activities? Is that framing the question right? The answer is no. And I mean, I guess I could just answer the question. It's a yes or no question, right? So why don't we do that? They do not. This is club land and it's a board decision.
Sorry. Mike, would you articulate, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 concerns that have been raised by the golf committee? And would you, we don't need to spend a lot of time because we will spend a lot of time on the 23rd talking about those. But could you just spend a little bit of time talking about your approach or what the board's approach has been around trying to address them? There are legitimate concerns with this decision that are beyond just the financial ones, which are their own tennis section, but there are legitimate concerns that have been raised by the golf committee that I think it's important for you to articulate to the rest of the group.
Good question. I'm just writing some notes here, so I make sure I think I touch them all. Yeah, absolutely. So there are concerns at the golf committee level and in the golf section, and all of those concerns have been addressed at this level. So the main concerns, and Muzz can maybe help me if I miss some. I think there's 4 or maybe 3, and these all kind of, some go to the, one of them is the use of the land would reduce the ability of the golf section to expand its facilities. Absolutely. And that has been from day one. And if anybody remember, well, maybe you don't remember because I didn't tell everybody, one of the first places that I went when I found this out is I sat with the group, the Sunday morning group, and I said, hey guys, who I've been playing with for 10, 15 years, this is what we got. Want to hear what you have to say about it. They were the first ones that I said, I know this is gonna be a challenge. Okay. So it's the use of the land, and the golf committee has talked about ways that can use that land. But my understanding is July 23rd is maybe the first open discussion with the golf membership as a whole about how they want to use that land. And so that's what we've been pushing for a long time. So it's a good start to July 23rd. They're going to do that. So that's one. And that's a challenge. There's only a finite amount of land. And that's what the engineering company we're going to meet tomorrow. They're going to let us know what land can accommodate what kinds of facilities because of slope, because of ledge, because of wetlands and things. They may not have all that information, but they're going to have a pretty good idea, setbacks, things like that. So, and we're going to take that land, we're going to look at it, golf says, oh, we'd really like to use this land for this. This is what it was cost. This is what it mean. Tennis, we want to use this land for this. This is what's going to cost. This is what it's going to mean. The board level, our job is to take that information, figure out what's best for the club. So in terms of the use of the land, that's one. Number two is the finances. And I think there's a concern, and we've been talking about this the whole time, is if the club takes on debt to construct a rackets facility, how is the rest of the club affected by that? And so we've been talking about in terms of understanding how much the debt can take so that other sections have access to the debt that they need. It's balanced, right? It's not unlimited. So that at the board level, we decide, how to allocate that, but making sure that that's available. And then also, how are dues or assessments or whatever going to be imposed on non-rackets members? Now, we have said from the beginning, this is a rackets facility. The cost of any facilities that are constructed will be paid for by section members who benefit from that facility. The reason I say it that way is because there was a question right here about space sharing and cost sharing. Well, if we come together and we find out that, what, it's best for the culture and the club and the costs and all these things, that there are parts of these facilities that are shared, then the golf section will share a appropriate proportion of the cost of construction or the maintenance of that. If it is 100% only rackets, that's it, and golf doesn't have any access to it and doesn't have any benefit from it, there will be no increase in their costs or dues related to that. So that's one of the finance parts. The debt is the other. The other is, what if the club defaults on that debt? Well, we're doing everything we can to make sure that that doesn't happen. There are some ways that we can create some distances between this facility and the liability of the club as a whole, but ultimately the club is the legal entity. They're the ones that are going to be borrowing the club. So eventually at some point, if there is default, yes, it is a liability of the club. And then the third one, so the finance use of land, and number three was the culture of the club. That is different for every person. And we have not yet really got a well-articulated answer from the golf committee about what culture they're talking about that they feel is going to be negatively impacted. And so I think there's going to be clarity on that on July 23rd. I am not going to speculate as to what I think that is. The club culture has been crucial to the way we've been discussing all of these things. And we feel that ultimately the way the Washington Club has been, the way it is, what we value, what our vision is going to be enhanced, that our club culture will have a net positive. That's subjective. So those are the three things, and they have been on our minds since the beginning of this whole thing. I get it. It's we're not all going to agree, but hopefully we can get something that's best for everybody. Does that get to what you're talking about, Mark? Okay, thanks. Yes, Mona. Sorry. Speaker, just so the folks online can hear. I'm sorry, Mike.
I'm a big fan of golf as well as tennis, so I'm partial to golf, but have we keep asking them what they don't want, like they talk about what they don't want, but if we ask them what they do want, like everybody in a negotiation wants something. There has to be something. Their bathrooms are shit, like their clubhouse is shit, like everything's shit, like there has to be something that they want.
Yeah, and Emma, that's exactly why we've been pushing for this survey. Well, to understand what the golf section as a whole wants. I mean, I think from my understanding, the golf committee has said that they want no tennis on that land. They want, they've talked about it, using that. No. I'd like to join the committee. Yeah. We'll stand next to each other. Yeah, no, we've been asking that, and it seems like every say, well, we want this, but those are actually competing. So you make a very good point. I don't know. I think we should, the communication has been a little challenging. Phil has a mic here.
Just want to add a little clarity to a couple of comments. I'm the only member of the strategic planning committee that is here as a past president. We have looked at the strengths, weaknesses, and threats to the club, what we want. We have developed a mission statement that I don't believe has been shared widely. That's number one. Number two, we were concerned and continue to be concerned to be a club and a facility that a vast majority of the residents of Washington and area around town are able to afford, so that we don't lose the culture that we have as a club. The third point gets to your comment, or maybe somebody in front of you, was if we are working with the Frederick Gunn School and they are going to be taking an active part in the facility, there may be a mechanism for us to give money directly to the school that would be tax deductible, that would then be funneled to the Washington Club to build out their enhanced portion.
So Phil, that was part of our discussion early on, and when we met with FGS, they had spoken to their legal counsel, and they felt like that was not something that was advisable. It could possibly put their nonprofit status in jeopardy. So we've gone to that, and unfortunately that's not going to work. But it was on our minds. Yes.
Could it be that the culture we're all talking about is possibly different for the golf members? You asked what they do want. I don't know anything about golf. I don't know a golf member. I'm new. What they want is to keep their situation to themselves, which I get, but what does that say about our culture as a club? Are we, so I don't.
Yeah, no, you make an extremely good point. And so getting to the point where we're like, articulate the culture you want, because we haven't had a clear understanding, because it keeps coming back. No, block, no. And so yeah, so I'm trying to be as hopeful as I can about the July 23rd meeting, that we will have clarity on that. And then we can say, okay, oh, this is what you want. This is how we will do everything that we can to keep as much as of what you want, and as much as what, I hate the we and they, but as much as what golf wants and as much as what tennis wants. I mean, I'm as much a golfer as I am a tennis member. You know, I played golf here for 5 years. When I came here before, I picked up a few weeks before I picked up a racket. So I'm part of that. But I'm going to hold off till we have that meeting, and maybe they can articulate that in the context of the entire section. And I think that's been the problem, that it's been a very small number that have been articulating and saying that they speak for the entire 215 members. And I'm not convinced that that's the case. And hopefully we get that on the 23rd.
Just quick, is the July 23rd meeting going to be on Zoom also?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Great.
Yes. There are many of us at golf that support the relocation. So that was a comment. And then Yvonne says, can you please clarify, read lights? Well, the courts have lights for only platform tennis courts. At this stage, because it's pretty explicit in the zoning regs, unilluminated tennis courts are allowed. And if it's not explicitly allowed, it is not allowed in the Washington zoning regulations. So right now, phase 2 does not include lighted tennis courts at this stage, although we did put that in our budget because so that we have it in case things change. So that answers Yvonne's question. Yes.
So I think we've talked about this, but probably what'll be super helpful is to have the golf membership together here with the tennis section, right? Talking about what tennis wants and hearing about what golf wants. And I think in a super non-judgmental way, right? Because what golf may not want anything. They may want to stay the same way that they are, because if you do want to be inclusive, here's a good example, like you may give somebody free admission to Bowles Bridge, but they're not going to feel comfortable there, right? It's not just about whether they can afford it and whether you subsidize it. It's about the spirit and the culture of the club. And our current state on the golf side is super inclusive. Maybe the bathrooms aren't amazing. You know, maybe there's no food. Clearly, that's not why people are going there. And that means that many more people feel comfortable there. So I think if we can have a meeting where we are, you know, kind of unified as a club to talk about all these competing interests, that will be helpful to maybe, you know, sort of quieting down a little bit of what sounds like some people are unhappy about on the golf side. There is one super tough conflict, which is if the land is used for tennis, it can't be used for golf. I don't know how that gets solved, but either way, it sounds like the piece that's missing, which I know, you know, talking about it quite a bit here, is you guys talking to the golf folks and then the golf people talking about what they care about. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know, the July 23rd meeting, Ethlyn has said that that's open. And, you know, based on that, I think hopefully that will shed some clarity on what the golf section as a whole wants. My gut feeling, well, everyone can be there. And then we will have a club-wide meeting afterwards, and, you know, after that and talk about that. My gut feeling is that once the wants and needs and desires of the entire golf section is understood, we're not as far off as it seems. That's my gut feeling from talking to a lot of people. And so that's why I think things will flush themselves out. So that's just my gut feeling. Les.
I was always taught since I was here that if the golf section wanted something, they assessed their members for it and did it if it was at all within means possible. Same thing is true of the beach section, where if they wanted to make improvements in the beach, the only ones who would bear the brunt of the payment would be those who are members of the section. Are you or are you not proposing that other sections pay for enriching the, and I don't mean to use it words that are not nice, enriching tennis section?
No. The tennis facility and anything that is used exclusively by the rackets section will be paid for by the racket section. Will be paid for and maintained by the racket section. Those members, their dues, their assessments, their new initiation member things. It will be all paid by that. Golf does not pay for anything that does not benefit the golf section members. I think we've been pretty clear on that. How are we doing?
Just take one. All right,
it sounds like we're going down. Maybe we can have time for one more question. I know we've used up a lot of your time. And
I have one more kind of question statement. I think the intent is 100% right? We're going to have the meeting on the 23rd. We're going to get a feeling for what the average golf member wants. My concern would be how you get that better through a survey, because everyone has 2 weeks to reply. They don't have to worry about if they have a barbecue that time or whatever. This is a great example. We have 240 tennis members. How many people came to this meeting? How many people came online to this meeting? It's quite a low number. A very vocal group, myself included, you know, cares passionately about tennis, and we've all had a lot to say. But if only 20% of the golf members show up to that meeting on the 23rd, which is probably highly likely to be 20% or less that will show up or go on Zoom, we still don't know what the average golf member wants. We only know what a very small, very loud golf members want, which we already know that. So that's my concern of doing a survey first. So you use the survey as a jumping off point to say, 84 of you said you don't want 18 holes. You only want 9 holes. So we don't need the land for that. Kind of, Simona's point, like, what do you want? 70 of you said you want an indoor practice video driving facility. So we're gonna give you 2 along the improved tennis facilities. I just think it has to start with the survey or we risk still not knowing what the average golf member.
I agree with you, Eric, and that has been the plan all along. The survey will not come before the meeting. I guess all I can say, the survey will come. But unfortunately, it will not come before that meeting. There's really not enough time to kind of vet it and go through all that and have it done. Because I was really hoping that the golf section would do that on their own. And then all of a sudden they said, we're gonna have a meeting on the July 23rd, which is great. But we don't have time to get a survey together that.
Been asking for 9 months to do the survey, and she's not done it. In any corporation in America, she did not have her job. The word is telling you to do something, and you don't do it. You're no longer the president of the company's vision. Second, you've given her more than enough chance to execute this. She's not done it. It's time to have her do her process. And you're being very blunt with that. Like, how many times do you have to ask her to do something which is for the good of the whole, and certainly for the good of the whole golf section as well?
So Eric didn't have his microphone on, but in essence, his stance is that the head of the golf section is not performed to the way would be expected, and considering having a new golf head. So I'm not gonna get into that right now. I'd like to get beyond July 23rd and see where we are there. Did you have another question? Yeah, we have a conflict of interest signed, and we have the form, and we had it together. And we've gotten sidetracked on a lot of other things, and it has not gotten signed. Yep. We have the document. We have the document and realize. Anyway, that's gonna happen. That will happen before the next board meeting. Before July 23rd. Yes. We do. We do have that. Yes.
Hi, for everyone, it's Lisa again. For everyone in this room, the reason we created the marketing communications group is because of the culture that you've mentioned, the brand that is the Washington Club. I am brand new here, but this is what I do for a living. The fact that there are not one forced group, that there are 3 separate sections, but it is still one club. And I gotta say, as a new member to this community, I am kind of dumbfounded that in a incredible community that this is so contentious. Our dues are low relative to other country clubs. All we are trying to do, Mona, I don't know you, but you asked, what is the objective? It's to build a great rackets facility and keep a culture of a club. It's really straightforward, it seems, and obviously I'm missing a lot of the history that's going behind this, but I actually just want to give a huge shout out to everyone sitting here, and Mike Porter most of all, for the incredible amount of work. I joined the tennis committee last summer. I cannot believe how much work is going into this, and the questions that are coming are constant, and you're getting it. I can't even imagine as someone who grew up here and everyone up here. So I just want to say that for the video, and I want to say for everyone in this room, that we all are one community, whether you're a member of this community, of tennis, or rackets rather, as we're now calling it, whether it's golf, whether it's beach, whether it's all of them or none of them, it's one community. And I think that needs, as a brand and culture, that needs to be reminded. We live in a beautiful spot. We are not in the Ukraine. We are not on the streets, I just like, there needs to be a little bit of perspective, and to give credit to the people who are doing the hard work of trying to figure something out. That is not a choice.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Yeah, I think that's a great way to end this meeting. Thank you so much for spending your time. Please do what you can to as we're talking about, to that July 23rd meeting. It's open, especially if you're a golf member, go there and let the leadership know what you're interested in. Thank you so much.